the Never Trump movement. I'll break it down into a couple of different area. Lagos has become one of the largest exporters of illegal ivory in the world.
Live in a third world nation where your votes will get stolen if you can vote for it at all.
Hello, world, and welcome to Around the World with Dane Waters. I'm your host, Dane Waters. It's always a pleasure to be here. So let's get into this. What's going on around the world? FIFA. Listen, I'm a huge football/soccer fan. Depends on where you are in the world. I was saddened to see that my team that I had chosen, Portugal's out. So hey, it was a good game. But the controversy, of course, Donald Trump specifically requesting the red card be removed so that a certain player could be there for the U.S. And of course, the U.S. got beat 4-1. It's just that there just shows no bounds for what he's willing to do, and it's just he wants to interject himself into everything. So anyway, but now my new team is England. I'm rooting for England, and so we'll see what happens. As you can see in my backdrop, I am a very supportive of the UK because I'm currently in the UK, and I just got back from Malaysia, Singapore, and Saudi Arabia. And what I'm seeing around the world is that, the world is in turmoil. There's no doubt about it. The world just doesn't know what to do. President Trump is on his way to NATO. It's hit or miss about what's going to happen there, whether or not he's actually going to start the process of removing us from NATO. I mean, he's already threatened, of course, to reduce troop sizes in the UK, not the UK, in Europe by a third. So it'll be an interesting week to see what happens. Russia has stepped up their attacks on Ukraine, and now the new thing on the battlefront are jet-powered drones, which are very difficult to shoot down by the typical Patriot missile systems and things of this nature, and that's just going to change the war. And the sad note is that, Russia just passed 2 million deaths, not counting what's on the Ukrainian side. 2 million Russians have died in the war. And it's argued that on the Ukrainian side, it's at least 750,000. So this is going to go down as one of the bloodiest conflicts in the history of man. And it's just sad, but I don't see, once again, any end in sight. But, I do believe that there's the possibility that there could be, Putin may be coming to the table at some point. Not that he's going to give in or pull out or retreat. But if you look at the videos of the long lines for the fuel shortage in Russia, I mean, it's starting to hit home, and I think Putin's going to have to do something about that. In the UK, we have Nigel Farage, who I've always said will probably be the next prime minister when there's the next general election. Keir Starmer's leaving, but the next prime minister will be a Labour PM because he'll be chosen within the party. But Nigel is in deep water with his financial dealings, and I don't know, Farage may not survive. So that prediction may not last as well. But just a lot going on. The world is just in a heck of a place, but never boring at all. So let's take a quick break from Around the World with Dane Waters, and we'll be back with our first guest. Thank you.
The world is full of stories, some hidden, some waiting to be told.
Do you think that the choice of this American as Pope had anything to do with Trump?
I think we have a tendency to want everything to have something to do with Trump today.
Real voices.
So do you see there ever being a Palestinian state? Yes or no?
I am not jumping up and down because of what Canada, UK, and Australia have done, because these are chicken countries when it comes to military might.
Real people.
Overpopulation will kill you, and the rise in the sea level will kill you. So you choose. I think it's time to choose how you're going to die anyway.
The fact that U.S. foreign policy has done some things that frankly, I'm not proud of in Iran.
Each sharing what connects us all.
There is no life for women, and education closed and banned for all women in Afghanistan.
From London to Lagos, from Prague to Taipei, Around the World with Dane Waters brings together thinkers, dreamers, and doers. Conversations that cross borders, stories that bridge divides. Heard in over 60 countries, these stories travel farther than borders, inspiring hearts, sparking ideas, and reminding us how connected the world truly is. Don't miss Around the World with Dane Waters.
Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. So let's get to it. So I'm very honored to have with me Philip Obaji. How you doing, Philip?
I'm good, Dane. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been over a year since you've been on the show, so it's been way too long. So we have a lot to catch up on. So Philip, tell us about yourself. Like I know that you're a journalist and you do a lot of things, but tell the audience, the global audience, more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Dane. Well, I am an investigative journalist who has spent the last 7 years uncovering a lot about Russian influence operations in Africa. But I've also spent a long time reporting on issues around security in West and Central Africa. But I became prominent as a journalist simply because I did a lot of investigations on foreign influence operations in Africa. And much of my work has appeared on the Daily Beast and USA Today, Foreign Policy, the UK Guardian, and a couple of other media outlets. I also have done a documentary which was released last year for Al Jazeera and that documentary focused on how Russia based the media to spread disinformation across West and Central. And I've had the chance to testify at the US Congress on Russian influence operations in Africa. I've addressed EU parliamentarians on a couple of occasions, and I have been across Europe talking about issues that concern Africa. So that's what I can say
Well,
about myself in general.
well, it's impressive. It's very impressive, and I'm very honored to have you here. And you definitely are an expert. Okay, let's just get down to me, very simply, the world is divided between good and evil. I know some people take issue when I talk about good versus evil, but and then on the evil side, I put China, Russia up there as the top, because they're trying to those authoritarian regimes are trying to take over the world. So let me start with this first question. Let's talk about Africa as a whole. So, are you concerned with Russian and Chinese influence in Africa?
Oh, yes, I am. I'm very concerned about it. I mean, in recent weeks, I've spent much time in Europe talking, having conversations with EU parliamentarians, leaders in different sectors, discussing issues around Russian and Chinese influence operations. And one of the biggest worries now is that both countries now have begun to work together in terms of influence, manipulations, and what have you, not just in Europe, but also in Africa as well. And we're seeing a situation where Russia, for example, are trying to influence politics in Africa, trying to influence democracy in Africa, trying to push Africans into areas where normally they would not want to get involved in. And China as well are trying to create economic influence through the help of disinformation and what have you. So it is huge and it's worrisome because they're trying to change certain things in Africa that really has impact on African economy, on African economies actually, and on democracies across the continent.
And people argue that when Prigozhin was killed by Putin, what we believe was killed by Putin, that Russia would not be as active in Africa. So kind of give us some case examples of what's happened in Russia. What is Russia actually doing in Africa that we should be concerned about?
Well, clearly the reason why the Russians are in Africa, especially if you look at the operations of then the Wagner Group and the African Corps, the reason why they came in the first place was to do business. And business comes first in their ideology, in their thinking, and then they offer security as an exchange for why they want to do business. It's not the other way around. So they've been involved in many African countries. They were involved in Sudan, and they had eyes on the Sudanese gold. And they've been involved in Mozambique, where they were helping to fight against so-called jihadists under the name of the Islamic State Central African province. And they've been involved in Mali, they've been involved in Libya, and they've been involved in quite a number of countries, in Burkina Faso as well. And even after the death of Prigozhin, I remember in 2023 when Prigozhin was killed in that plane crash, nobody knew exactly what would be of the Wagner Group and whether or not the group will continue to be effective in Africa. So I decided on my own to take a trip to the Central African Republic to find out what was left of the Wagner Group after Prigozhin's death. And I still saw that they were operating with the same level of aggression, with the same energy that was the case under Prigozhin. So the Russians are still trying to cement their stronghold in a number of countries. They're very active in Mali. They're very active in the Central African Republic. But the area which they're expanding, even going deeper than the were, even while Prigozhin was alive, is the aspect of propaganda and disinformation. We're seeing the Russian disinformation and propaganda continue to grow massively across Western Central Africa. We're seeing situations where the media in West Africa is receiving money, or some media outlets, not the entire media actually, some media outlets continue to receive money from Russian agents to publish disinformation, and that is expanding. I mean, I did an investigation for Al Jazeera, which is captured in the documentary called Africa's Ghost Reporters, where we uncovered a scheme where some media outlets were collecting as modest as $80 to publish an article on the outlets. So yeah, Russian influence operations in Africa is still very much alive, and it's even growing.
Well, yeah, and I share your concern. I mean, I work around the world. I was just in Middle East, and I was just in Asia, and Russia and China especially are definitely around. So let's talk about the absence of America. I mean, do you think that because America under Trump, at least in my opinion, has been pulling back on countering some of this stuff, is it allowing an opportunity for Russia and China to get a greater hold in places like Africa?
I think so. I think that the US, the fact that it somehow did not continue with its international support through the USAID, has had an effect on a lot of programs in Africa, including how Africans can effectively counter disinformation, whether it's from Russia or from China. So that's one really sad effect with US pullback. But also Europe is also not really too effective. And I say this because the administrative bottlenecks, the bureaucracy that we see when it comes to how Europe can intervene in Africa and how Europe can support effective programs and policies that are helping to fact check many of this disinformation, helping to combat disinformation and propaganda. So the West in general haven't really been very effective when it comes to assisting Africa combat this. While the Americans have pulled back, the Europeans have been too slow in terms of how to get involved, how to intervene.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the issues. I mean, I think that you see where, Russia, the fact that when I was working in Ukraine for a long period of time just before the war, and I was advising the administration there to watch out for this collaboration between Russia and China. And early on, the Zelensky administration was,
Yeah.
they didn't think that was going to happen, that China was going to be complicit with Russia, but they clearly are. And so you have a situation where Russia, I would argue, are the brute force. They're the mafia, and you get China, which has a financial hold over these countries. And I think the working together of these two countries is enough to scare the hell out of all of us. But let's talk about. I want to just kind of take a break here to talk about Western Sahara. Because I see Western Sahara becoming a battleground between the East and the West. What do you know about that situation?
Well, it's a very dicey situation because in one side you have Morocco trying to lay full claims, and then you have countries in the West taking their own side on exactly what status Western Sahara should have. But I'm also very concerned about the fact that if this whole dilemma continues to go on, we could see a situation where you have not exactly the kind of Cold War we saw in the 1990s, but we see a situation where maybe two different factions, the East and West, fighting each other, and Western Sahara becomes the two. So that is pretty much what I can say about Western Sahara. Still a very dicey political situation, and Morocco has got to really find ways on how to deal with the Western Sahara situation. Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a perfect, as you talk about Cold War, I mean, it's a perfect example where you have, the Polisario, the Western Sahara getting very close to the Russians. You got America very close to the Moroccans who take claim over it. So it's definitely a proxy war conflict taking place there, and a place that I have a lot of interest in as well. And And let's talk about, let's talk about specifically the upcoming elections. I mean, I know that in Nigeria there's going to be a presidential election coming up. I mean, does it concern you that Russia and China will try to influence the outcome of that election?
I can tell you, Dane, that Russia will try to influence the outcome of the elections in Nigeria. I can say that to you. And we've seen this happen in the past where democracy in Africa has suffered from foreign influence, manipulation, foreign interference, and I would say categorically Russian interference. We saw this in Madagascar in 2019. Elections that brought in Andrei Rajoelina as president. We saw how the Russians propped up Rajoelina's candidature. He was not the incumbent candidate. He was not the incumbent president. And he also, in the beginning, was never the likely one to be elected. But the Russians pumped in a lot of money, carried out a massive campaign of disinformation, also created a newspaper in Madagascar that eventually, in no time, became the highest selling newspaper in the country. So we saw how this campaign eventually led to the election of Andrei Rajoelina. So Nigeria has always been on Russia's radar, and I expect that in the build-up to the elections next year, targeting the Nigerian electorate, especially the group of people who probably are opposed to the candidate that the Russians want to support.
I lost you for a second there. Anyway, oh, there you are. Are you back, Philip?
Yeah. Okay. So I expect to see Russian involvement in the Nigerian.
Philip, yeah. So, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's on my. Go ahead. Well, do you think who has an interest in that? I mean, where do you think that when we talk about Russian influence in the election there, listen, once again, this election in Nigeria is going to be kind of very complicated, where you have the fact that Peter Obi and Atiku are on different parties again. You got the incumbent president Tinubu. I mean, what is the long-term interest of Russia in Nigeria? What do they want?
Now, first of all, Russia wants to have the strongest say as far as Africa is concerned. You can see how they've tried to create an expansion across Africa in terms of how much influence they have on the continent. You have the Africa Initiative, which is the media arm of the GRU sort of influence operations in Africa. And Africa Initiative is a website, it's a media outlet that publishes materials in English, in Spanish, in French, in Arabic. So the aim of the Africa Initiative is to be able to influence opinions across the African continent. And they're recruiting many people to work on that platform. So that tells you, first of all, that Russia is seeking to have somewhat of a massive influence, massive visibility in Africa. And you go across Western Central Africa, you see some bit of a Russian presence in the sense that you see massive Russian disinformation in some major news outlets across Western Central Africa. So what they want to achieve is to be able to achieve new friends, have governments that are pro-Russia. Because if you have a government that is pro-Russia, it means that Russia can be able to achieve its own goals. And these goals include having Russian companies do business in these countries, having Russian ideas being able to be implemented in these countries. I give an example: Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are three pro-Russian countries. And you have leaderships in these countries that really support Russian ideas and tilt completely towards Russia. In Niger, when the military took power and truncated democracy, one of the first decisions made by the military junta was to suspend a law that actually was helping to stem the migration flow from Niger to Libya. And that's because some of the Russians have also tried to see how they can help file migration problems for Europe. So what they want to achieve is having more countries in Africa become pro-Russia, so Russian companies can do business in mining, especially. And we've seen this particular playbook in the Central African Republic, where you have Russian companies completely involved in the mining sector in Car. And you see Russian planes flying to Car, taking gold, selling off in the Gulf region. So that enables Putin with financial muscle to continue his war in Ukraine. So Nigeria will be a very important country for Russia as elections, approach.
Yeah, no, I mean, what Russia does, Russia goes after countries that have tremendous natural resources, and Nigeria definitely does. And once again, when I equate Russia to a bunch of mobs and maybe a mafia, they are. I mean, that's what they want to do. But in addition to the natural resources, we can also talk about human beings as natural resources. I mean, there's been reports that Russia has been trying to take men to the war in the Ukrainian war, and also about human trafficking. Talk to us more about that.
Well, yes, you're right, Dean. And we have seen in the last couple of years, especially since Russia began to record massive losses on the front lines in Ukraine, we've seen recruitment of Africans to fight in Ukraine's Donbas region increase astronomically. Well, if we go back to 2022, which was the first time there was any report about Russia recruiting Africans for the war in Ukraine, it was my report. And in January 2022, I had reported that this was just before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I reported that Russia had pulled about 200 former rebels in the Central African Republic, and they had flown them to Moscow, where they were undergoing training for an eventual deployment to Ukraine, where a war was imminent. So I had spoken to some of my contacts within the Wagner Group, and I was told at the time that Russia had pulled these 200 mercenaries. And to give you an understanding of how things work in Russia, in the northwest of the Car, so how things work in the Central African Republic. In the northwestern region of the Central African Republic, Russia has been in combat against rebels from a group known as the Union for Peace. The Union for Peace is a rebel group that is mostly of Fulani origin, where fighters have complained about marginalization for a long time, and they have been fighting to control some of the gold mines present in this region. So the Russians have been at war with this group because the Russians also have the same aim to control these gold mines. But the Russians offered an amnesty to any militant who was willing to lay down their arms. This amnesty program began in 2021. So they said, if you're willing to lay down your arms, you will be brought into the Wagner fold, you'll be trained overseas and paid a monthly stipend where you will be able to take care of your family, and then you will join the Wagner fold to help fight against other militia groups. So some of those who accepted were actually flown to Moscow on training. So that was the first time that we saw that the Russians were recruiting from Africa. And then when the full-scale invasion began in Ukraine, the Russians started to recruit Central Africans from prisons. So I reported that Prigozhin had asked his commanders to recruit from prisons. So afterwards, it became difficult for the Russians. Were actually losing hundreds of thousands of fighters, yearly, and it became very important for them to seek manpower overseas. And now they have started programs where they are able to recruit Africans across Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa. And it's what they call the Alabuga Start program. And that program seeks to recruit Africans for just more than one role. So the men are recruited to fight on the front lines in Ukraine. The women are recruited to work in a drone making factory in Russia, just about 800 kilometers near Moscow. And in the beginning, most people who were recruited actually thought they were going to work in different roles, in a different capacity in Russia, either as drivers or as maids, and what have you. But on arrival in Russia, they realized that they've actually been forced or been coerced into fighting in Ukraine or into working in the drone factories. But these days, we find that some Africans are even aware that their travels to Russia could mean that they end up in the front lines, but they still make the trips anyway. So, good thing is that it's something that people are now aware of, and those who really don't want to fight can say, no, I don't want to fight. I don't want to travel to go and fight.
Well, as we talked about, as I talked about before you got on the show, I mean, Russia is now, people are saying that there 2 million Russian soldiers have died on the front lines. I mean, so definitely they have to replenish those troops. And, we see that in Asia. When I was just in Asia, there's a lot of talk about Russia and China helping them get soldiers to the front lines. And then, of course, throughout Africa. So let's talk real quick about China. I mean, what is China? I mean, tell us a little bit more about what China is doing in Africa, and in conjunction with Russia.
Well, first, the Chinese are involved in virtually every country in sub-Saharan Africa, involved in construction, involved in mining, and they're involved everywhere. Economically, China has shown its vast presence, and in some places, the Chinese want to be involved in politics. And mind you, these contracts that the Chinese companies get in Africa do come from politicians, do come from the highest authorities in many countries across Africa. And we are seeing a situation where we are having to contend with massive amounts of disinformation that is spreading across the media space in Africa. I mean, Chinese disinformation oftentimes is focused not necessarily to create chaos, but to prop up Chinese interests in Africa, unlike the Russians that really look into how they can get involved in actions that really, in some cases, could even truncate democracy in a number of African countries. But the Chinese have been spreading some bit of disinformation, trying to make people believe that local companies, for example, really don't have capacity to work other than China, trying to discredit certain people, and trying also to prop up Chinese interests in African nations. And very soon, you will find an investigation by a group of media outlets that really explains exactly the collaboration between Russia and China in a number of places, especially in the global south. So, but in general, Chinese influence operations, especially when it has to do with manipulation on the kind of disinformation that props up Chinese interest, that discredits certain local content, and just a way of making sure that people see China in a very different light.
Yeah, I was just doing some work recently in South America, and the big issue there, the Chinese love to bribe government officials, and especially one thing that people don't seem to understand is that they think about, okay, whether it's the foreign minister or the president or the vice president, China is trying to bribe those individuals. But what China is very special at doing is that the staffers in these offices, and we've seen it here in the UK, which is something that's going to be coming out soon, is that China is very smart in how they manipulate these governmental offices and who they get on their payroll. So, so one last quick question. From the religious divide, do you see that between the Muslim and Christian divide, do you think Russia or China is trying to play that card at all?
Well, they definitely will play that card, especially with the Russians, especially with the elections coming up, and depending on who they back, they are going to play the whole religious and ethnic card, because you want to somehow disenfranchise people from voting, especially in areas where you have a candidate that you're not supporting. So I expect to see that going forward, especially when they pick their preferred choice. They probably have already picked who they want to back in the forthcoming elections. They probably haven't. But as we progress, as we get close to the elections, you're going to see clearly exactly what the Russians want to do and who they'll be backing. And if you watch out in the media, if you watch the spaces that have been promoting pro-Russian narratives, you're going to find exactly the thinking of the Russians based on who these trolls are supporting. Whoever the trolls are supporting, you know that, okay, well, this is exactly what the Russians want. And there are some trolls that have made their name by backing pro-Russian narratives or by spreading Russian disinformation. So if you watch out for those trolls and see what they're backing as elections near, then you will know exactly what the Russians want in Nigeria.
Listen, Philip, I really appreciate it. I mean, and I share your concern about what the Russians and the Chinese are going to do. The reality is they're authoritarian regimes. They don't care about democracy. They care about themselves. They don't care about the people. And then in the absence of both the United States and, as you said, a very slow Europe, they can basically operate unfettered in Africa and around the world. So it's a very scary time. So I applaud your efforts in keeping a light on this and what's going on. And I look forward to any reports that you have and having you back on the show. So thank you for what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dane.
Well, listen, thanks for being with Dane Waters, Around the World with Dane Waters. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back with our next guest. Thank you.
Thank you.
The world is full of stories, some hidden, some waiting to be told.
Do you think that the choice of this American as Pope had anything to do with Trump?
I think we have a tendency to want everything to have something to do with Trump today.
Real voices.
So do you see there ever being a Palestinian state? Yes or no?
I am not jumping up and down because of what Canada, UK, and Australia have done, because these are chicken countries when it comes to military might.
Real people.
Overpopulation will kill you, and the rise in the sea level will kill you. So you choose. I think it's time to choose how you're going to die anyway.
The fact that U.S. foreign policy has done some things that frankly, I'm not proud of in Iran.
Each sharing what connects us all.
There is no life for women, and education closed and banned for all women in Afghanistan.
From London to Lagos, from Prague to Taipei, Around the World with Dane Waters brings together thinkers, dreamers, and doers. Conversations that cross borders, stories that bridge divides. Heard in over 60 countries, these stories travel farther than borders, inspiring hearts, sparking ideas, and reminding us how connected the world truly is. Don't miss Around the World with Dane Waters.
Host, continue to be your host. Listen, we're waiting for our next guest to get on, but let's just kind of do a recap of what's going on, between Russia and China. I mean, it's I can't stress this enough. We live in a world where America is absent internationally. Okay, and you're going to see happening at NATO. Absolutely, you're going to see that. Europe, they're preoccupied with the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Okay, so. They're still trying to decide. I mean, they're focused on trying to increase their military and try to get to a point where they can fight the battles that they need to in case Russia decides to expand this war. So they're not looking in Africa. They're not looking to support Africa or South America or Taiwan or other Southeast Asian countries, and neither is America. So if you're Russia and you're China, you're thinking about, okay, now is the opportunity for me to act. And it's not just overtly, it's not just a war, just like what Russia is engaging in. It's all that Philip was just talking about as far as manipulating the media, disinformation campaigns, bribing government officials, investing in businesses, and ensuring that these businesses are controlled by Russian and Chinese assets. It is a free for all, or open, I should say, just an open opportunity for Russia and China to do what they want. And this should concern every single individual. And, I'm not casting aspersions about what's going to happen in the Nigerian elections or any other elections in Africa, but Russia and China in every single election has a preferred candidate. Just like, you see Donald Trump getting involved and saying, we like this person or this person, which America really shouldn't do, but, Russia and China are the same way, that they're going to do everything they can do to ensure that their preferred candidate wins. And Russia and China combined is the scariest threat to global security, global democracy, global economic freedom that the world has ever seen. And it's a huge issue. And we definitely, I just want to just stress that we all need to wake up and recognize that and see that and just think it doesn't impact you. But listen, if you're there in Nigeria, it does impact you. Okay, like what Philip was saying, is that if Russia gets their way, they're going to come start taking people off the street to put on the front lines in the war. China's going to manipulate the economy and going to make sure that they benefit and not the average Nigerian. This is not something that people can just say, I don't care. Anyway, that's my diatribe on that. So listen, let's take another quick break from Around the World with Dane Waters while we wait on our next guest, and I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
The world is full of stories, some hidden, some waiting to be told.
Do you think that the choice of this American as Pope had anything to do with Trump?
I think we have a tendency to want everything to have something to do with Trump today.
Real voices.
So do you see there ever being a Palestinian state? Yes or no?
I am not jumping up and down because of what Canada, UK, and Australia have done, because these are chicken countries when it comes to military might.
Real people.
Overpopulation will kill you, and the rise in the sea level will kill you. So you choose. I think it's time to choose how you're going to die anyway.
The fact that U.S. foreign policy has done some things that frankly, I'm not proud of in Iran.
Each sharing what connects us all.
There is no life for women, and education closed and banned for all women in Afghanistan.
From London to Lagos. From Prague to Taipei. Around the World with Dane Waters brings together thinkers, dreamers, and doers. Conversations that cross borders, stories that bridge divides. Heard in over 60 countries, these stories travel farther than borders, inspiring hearts, sparking ideas, and reminding us how connected the world truly is. Don't miss Around the World with Dane Waters.